You're talking about a spiritual journey there.
Exactly, that's what it was. It was an awakening, okay.
But you've skipped a huge part of that spiritual journey.
I did.
Maybe
that's what happened. Tell me what I missed.
Well, the journey that one Captain Benjamin J. Willard went on was a spiritual journey too. I was watching, in the preparation for this afternoon, Eleanor Coppola's documentary about the making of Apocalypse Now, Hearts of Darkness.
Oh, I hoped you wouldn't mention that.
But there is, everybody knows, I think, that famous scene at the beginning of Apocalypse Now where you are in your underwear, you are drunk, and this is on record, that you, the actor, was drunk, not just the character, and you do this scene where you are absolutely raw, bare, open to us. And there's a point at the end, you tumble over the bed, your hand is bleeding from having cut it on the mirror, and you say, "My heart is broken."
Ah. When did this happen?
I think you probably know.
Okay. I have some vague memory. It's very hard to watch that stuff,
Yeah, I'm wondering how different it is to watch that from watching...
Daniel
Barry.
I watched before that's a documentary that was going to be released as a feature, and I had interviewed for it, but I had never seen the footage, and they sent it to me to see before it went out, to just see, so that I'd know what was coming down, and I saw it. Oh, geez, I was just stunned by it because I'd never seen it, and I was watching it with a friend who didn't know me back then, and they said, "Oh, geez, you're in for it now." And they said, "How do you feel?" And I said, "Well, it's interesting because that is who I was. That's not who I am." So that allowed me to get beyond it. Yeah,
Was that a type of transcendent experience as well, though? That scene.
Yeah, surely it was. Yeah, I'm an alcoholic, and I would do things like that. The insanity of alcoholism will take you to places of despair and darkness where you think that's who you are, and you explore that, in your brokenness. You only explore the darkness because you don't understand that you're loved, And so that's where I was at that time. And so, it was a very dark, scary place. And the scene started, it was my 36th birthday. I'd been drinking all day, and celebrating. And I didn't know what was coming, but I knew I was going to wrestle one of the demons here. I knew I was going to see a part of myself, and some part of me wanted to see it on film. I knew that something was different about this one. It wasn't just a alcoholic rage. It was a moment in time that I had to look at that and see what other people, family members, had seen in me, This terrible, terrible despair, darkness, self-loathing, guilt, all of the things that destroy our humanity. And so I did it. And so, I had to kind of live with that. I remember Francis wanted me to see the footage before, because they were sending all the footage to Rome to be, processed and then sent back with the pasta.
This is Francis Ford Coppola. Yeah.
And so he kept telling me, he said, "I want you to see that footage. You must see that footage." And I said, "No, I'll never, ever look at that footage. I don't want to see it. It's not important to me." He said, "Well," he said, I could cut that so that you'll look like Mickey Mouse." And I said, "Yeah, but then you'll look like Walt Disney." I didn't actually say that, but it's one of those things that you wish you say, after you've been bullied on the street, and by the time you get home, you beat the bully up, and,
You must have had enormous trust in him, though. I mean, in this, we're talking about a shoot that
to his credit, he tried
least.
To stop that scene, and I begged him to keep going. He tried. You can hear him in the documentary.
Yeah.
Saying, "Martin, yeah, right. Let's call it quits." Kind of, And I said, "No, I'm going there. Yeah, keep it rolling." Yeah.
You wrestled with the demon there, and I just want to say, I know that you, your wife Janet, your children, the family, that there are demons being wrestled with at the moment. I know you don't want to talk about that. We're not going to talk about it. But I am pretty certain that there's not a person sitting here, there's not a person listening at home that doesn't want you to know that they hope that those demons within the family are struggled with, and that a place of peace is found at the end of all of this. I think everybody would want to pass those
thanks.
wishes.
Thanks so much. Another acknowledgement for the fire exits.
Would, where did that voice come from? A transcendent experience. Would Apocalypse Now even get near to being made in the current movie industry, do you think?
Well, it would, but not the way we did it. You know, there was no blue screen in those days. There was no special effects per se, and there's not a single special effect in the picture that we were filming from. You know, chopper to chopper, even the cameras in one chopper filming a scene in this chopper going through the air. We had some very close calls on those choppers, you know, and they were terrifying. And so even when they're on the ground and the blades are going, you were warned not to get near the tails, you know. That when we practiced those scenes, the choppers would all be in position on the beaches and the tails would be spinning, or they'd be still then, but during the scenes they'd be spinning. And the noise was terrifying. You couldn't hear a word, and they'd kick up the sand and the wind. And there'd be a guy with a bamboo stick standing near the tail, and he'd whack you if you got near it, and he'd say, "It's going to be much worse during the scene. Don't come near this area," you know. And so I had a healthy respect for those wretched machines and the men that flew them. But the whole film for me was dangerous because I was 36 when I started filming. I think I finished it when I was 40. I don't know. It seemed like it. It was almost a year and a half filming it, and I was not as nimble as some of the lads. You know, Sam Bottoms was 21, I think, and Freddie was. They were all much younger than I, and I felt like an old man. You know, and so you know, when the first phase of it, you know, we were going along and this enormous storm came. It had a name in the international community. Locally, it was called Typhoon Didang, and it wiped out the whole area we were in, and 241 people were killed. And it was horrifying, and we were based in two different camps, and we had no radios. Cell phones in those days didn't exist, and we thought they'd been wiped out, and they thought we'd been wiped out, and we had to be evacuated. All this went down. And the film went on hiatus, and I came home and learned how to swim. I thought that would be a good thing to do since I'd be on a boat without a life jacket the whole time in the film. And so I did that, and I took some training to be a soldier. A young fella who had been in Vietnam and badly wounded trained me with all the small weapons and such, and gave me confidence. So we went back more prepared, you know.
James Dean had been a big hero, and that's evident in Badlands. I mean, Kit Carruthers.
That was part of the film, part of the script before I got it, you know.
But he looked like, in Badlands, that Kit Carruthers looked like James Dean. And
I love James Dean. Oh, jeez, I loved him. Everything changed when James Dean came. Some of you young people probably don't have a clue who he was, but he made like 3 movies. He starred in 3 movies, and he was killed he was 24 years old. He was unbelievable. And the first time I saw him was East of Eden, and he had been killed months before. I hadn't a clue who he was. And I remember I couldn't leave the theater. I couldn't get up. I stayed through the second showing. In those days, they'd show it twice, you know. And I couldn't believe this guy and what happened. And it took me a while to realize that this guy had transcended acting. It was about behavior in front of the camera. And it made all the difference. Even though we'd had Marlon Brando and Monty Clift before then, this guy, whoa, he really transcended the craft, at least motion picture acting, to a level we'd never seen it. It was something deeply personal and transcendent and behavioral. Whew, he was powerful.
If you had James Dean in Badlands, you had Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
And another icon, and I think hero of yours as well.
Very much so. I adored him. Yeah.
Even at that point in your career, would there have been any sense of, being intimidated inside, thinking, I now have to go and act
with Marlon
the
it was. Yeah, everybody was intimidated by Marlon. And that was that was really the only problem, was with him, was the image you brought to him, because he didn't, the last thing he'd talk about was movie making or acting or any of that. He wanted to know who you were, where you came from, what you did, what was your family like, And I adored him. He was a great, great man. We stayed friends the rest of his life, and he was one of my heroes. Yeah.
If Francis Ford Coppola asked you to shoot a movie today that was only going to last a few weeks, he thought, would you do it?
Well, it would depend on the script, the story.
So it's character rather than director that would.
No, I'd love to work with him. I think he's one of the great directors ever. I mean, I think, The Godfathers 1 and 2 put together is some of the best filmmaking ever, I think. And I can't stop watching. You go channel surfing and that comes up, well, I'm stuck, and you know how it's going to turn out and all, but it's just mesmerizing stuff. Those 2 films alone, not to mention all the other stuff he did, including Apocalypse, But
if you think of Apocalypse, which was this great anti-war hymn in some ways.
Yeah.
I was really surprised yesterday when we were chatting and you said to me that had you been given the draft, had you been drafted into the army in the early 60s, you would have quite happily gone to fight in Vietnam. First of all, explain why you didn't go, and did that change that feeling of wanting to go and fight?
Well, no, when I was a boy, there was a mandatory draft. You had to register on your 18th birthday. It was the law, and then you were called up eventually. And I was classified 4F because I had a birth defect. My left arm had been crippled when I was born, basically. And I was just kind of put on a list. And then, of course, most of my classmates were Vietnam-era guys. A lot of them went to Vietnam, that didn't go to college. They ended up in Vietnam. And that would have been my lot, too. But for this defect, and so at the time, sure, I would have gone. Yeah, I would have been drafted if I'd been physically fit, and I would have gone to. I had 2 brothers in Vietnam. I had one who was decorated. It was a Marine. Sorry.
You're thinking of him?
Yeah, it's my. My brother John was a decorated hero in Vietnam. He survived it, but he had a very difficult time, and he's one of my heroes. He's still alive, God love him, and just a remarkable man. I could talk endlessly about him. My feelings for him are with joy, I promise you. He joined the Navy. He wanted to be a doctor when he was a boy. We came from a kind of a poor family when higher education was difficult, but he thought, well, if you joined the Army or the Marine or the Navy, you'd get medical training along the way. And so he became a corpsman in the Navy. And the Navy, was involved in Vietnam in that in 1964, after the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, it committed the Marines, and they are part of the Navy. So they took all the corpsmen that they could get from the Navy and took them into combat. And so my brother John had never trained ever to fire a weapon, nothing, found himself in some horrible conflicts, and he lost all his friends. And he became a lunatic, a raging alcoholic. He came home, and all he wanted to do was beat people up and get drunk, and he'd end up in jail and beat people up in jail. He was just having his terrible life, and he finally had a moment of clarity and got